Hello, how's everyone doing today? Well, how many times have you come home from work and the first thing you hear on the news is about how many people were killed in Afghanistan today, how many innocent civilians were hurt, etc.? Well, I don't know about you, but I am getting very, very tired of this. And I think it's time for a change. I appreciate you letting me have a few minutes today of your time. My name is Brian Hoffmeister. I'm a lifelong space travel enthusiast and NASA admirer. I'd like to speak to you about how we're about to give up control of our future to fight wars that don't really solve problems, and how we can stop this. We will look back at Apollo for inspiration, look at the current state of human spaceflight, and look ahead at two possible futures. There is a choice to be made. We can either train a new generation to fight our wars, or we can inspire a new generation of explorers who will lead us to our destiny, exploring the universe. So let's start this journey with a quick look at human spaceflight and how we've been doing things thus far. Most of us are aware that in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, NASA produced such innovative and wonderful programs as Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. Apollo, of course, being our flights to the moon. And what we gained from that was an improvement in our education by having NASA, the scientists at NASA, the engineers at NASA, and the astronauts all contribute to the educational process by interacting with students, by giving lectures that were recorded and later shown to the students, and many other things, as well as correspondence and things like this. Then in the 1980s, we saw the dawn of the space shuttle. And that in itself was a revolution in that it allowed us to be able to reuse these components and return again and again, but only to low Earth orbit. Now, this offered many great, wonderful things that we were able to do and technologies we were able to develop. However, the problem is that that was lacking the exploration component. And as an MIT group has stated, the effects on our culture are such that, and I quote, "Human spaceflight has been the great human and technological adventure of the past half-century. By putting people into places and situations unprecedented in history, it has stirred the imagination while expanding and redefining human experiences." Now, needless to say, this sort of thing not only inspires students, but it also inspires the general public. Now, I think it would be a good idea at this time to go ahead and let's start looking at what's happening now with the end of the space shuttle program and where are we going next. Many have blamed the lack of interest by the general public as part of the problem with the space shuttle program and why it has not received continued funding as Apollo did. Well, I believe that we are lacking in the commitment to really make space exploration a priority for this country. Now, we've done so with various robotic missions, such as the various Mars rovers that we've sent up, and yet that has only drawn a certain limited attention from the public. And a lot of that is dictated by how much attention it gets in the media. Well, that can all change. It doesn't have to be that way. But NASA has chosen, well, not just NASA, NASA and President Obama have chosen to take a different path and allow private space industry to get involved and to actually blossom. Well, this is a wonderful thing. It also offers many limitations. So let's take a little bit of a look at some of that their most recent events and where that may take us. The commercialization of space has started. Now we have several companies such as SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and others who are investing heavily in basically establishing a tourism and trying to establish a new renewed interest in space travel. Now, obviously, we've had a few things that have come up that have been probably the most obvious to the public, which is we have NASA, who's going to begin counting on these private companies to provide transportation to the space station. Because right now we have a limited arrangement with the Russians, but that will not suffice for long. We're going to have to be able to get our people and supplies up to the International Space Station and back on a more frequent and regular basis. So that's why they are working in conjunction with these private companies. However, we have to be careful about just where this leads, because when it goes to the private industry, the nation, the taxpayers, lose control of how much these things cost, how much we're willing to invest in the various things. All we can do is control NASA's budget. But there are still other ways that this can work against us. But it's a promising future, so I think we need to keep looking ahead at that and supporting these companies for now. In the very near future, we're going to see vehicles like the Stratolaunch and the Falcon 9 begin taking passengers up into space. Falcon 9 will start first, which is SpaceX's project, and that will largely be devoted, at least at first, to simply replacing the space shuttle as far as getting back and forth to the International Space Station. But the Stratolaunch will maybe go a bit further than that, and Virgin Galactic is going to go beyond that, because they are looking more at commercialized aspect, the tourism, and seeing just what can be done. Perhaps in the next 10 to 15 years we'll start seeing hotels in space. But here's the thing. I've been talking about exactly why and what's going on, but why aren't our funds going to these sorts of things? Well, it's because we are right now in two different wars, and it's costing us a lot of money. So let's start taking a look at that. As we can see by this graph, clearly more money is being spent by far on defense than education and NASA's budget combined. Now, when we're talking about these huge differences, I mean, a total of 4.2% for those two things compared to almost 25% for defense, which is, for all intents and purposes, what we use for war, but also for defending the country. And I think that we really need to begin to look at this, and everyone needs to educate themselves and look this up for themselves and educate yourself. But my point here today is we need to choose a different way. For instance, it was recently noted each day in Afghanistan cost the government more than it did to build the Pentagon. I don't know about you, but that seems a little much to me. I understand that we need to defend our country, and yet, at the same time, we need to also move into the future. And in the process of spending so much money on defense, we are neglecting education, both early education as well as the extended education, college. We need to start looking at that and deciding if we as a country really want to go this path, or if maybe we want to do something differently when it comes to our national priorities. Can somebody else handle this? Let's take a look. Right now, while all this money is being spent on our military, we are, as I had said before, leaving education and NASA relatively unfunded. The consequences of this is a country that's less competitive in the world market. We lack innovation and invention, and our standard of living is dropping as other countries such as China and India are raising theirs. Clearly, we need to reevaluate our priorities. Now, we have two ways that we can proceed in the future. The first is to continue on doing what we are and deluding ourselves into believing that we are the world's police force. Or we can hand that over to the UN, who is better prepared to handle all of the issues involved and see them from a much more objective point of view. Although we may not agree with it and the system may not work perfectly all the time, it's still worth keeping in mind that this is truly the fair and, let's face it, American democratic way of doing things. As researchers at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences recently stated, space continues to attract broad public interest, although it must compete for attention in an increasingly diverse, overheated, and unstable media environment. Surveys show that a majority of Americans support the exploration programs. I think the defense cuts, emphasis on education, and commitment to space exploration is our future. And I think we need to take action today, and I believe that every one of us needs to educate ourselves on these issues, see what the war costs us every day, see how many millions of dollars are spent every day simply on ammunition alone. Now, I've got a few closing thoughts here, and then I'll wrap things up. And let's take a look at just, again, what we're saying. I believe it is clear when we look at the costs and effects of our current wars that we are not handling things as well as we can. If we can come together now and refocus on the benefits of space exploration, our future will be brighter than ever. By empowering the United Nations to act more forcefully to defend human rights, we can drastically reduce our military spending, fully fund our nation's manned spaceflight program, and put more of our taxpayer dollars into education and science. Making these investments will aid in improving relations with other nations, give us new goals to achieve, which will drive us to create new technology and improve upon old technology. We must train the leaders of tomorrow so that they will not repeat the mistakes of our past. We can all start today by logging on to www.usa.gov, finding the email address and phone number for our elected officials, then taking a few moments to write or phone them. Let them know how important you feel that human spaceflight is to our future, and that the future of our beloved children depends on our investment in science, education, and exploration. This change in priorities will change our world for the better, as we begin to set aside our differences and forge ahead with a new vision of tomorrow. A future where living on the moon or Mars might be very little different than living in New York City or Los Angeles. And with that in mind, I thank you for your time, and I hope you will all make sure to investigate this, think about the choices that we make in supporting war, and perhaps change our minds, change who you vote for, and think about the gains that we have in our lives today in technology, education, and standard of living because of spaceflight, especially human spaceflight, because it is that human factor that allows us to innovate and invent. Thank you, and have a nice day.